87-year-old Caroline Dean's mission is to save endangered wildflowers and to share what she learns with others.
On my webpage, 82,000 people have looked at it from all over the world.
The story of the garden and the gardener, next on A Gardener's Diary.
I found a garden in Opelika, Alabama that was full of native plants, many that I'd never seen before. It belongs to Caroline Dean, a great-grandmother with the energy of a teenager. With the help of her son Dan, she has created garden spots on her 110-acre farm, many that will become home to hundreds of native plants uprooted by development and saved by the diligence of plant rescuers. Over the past 35 years, Caroline has meticulously photographed and cataloged Alabama wildflowers. A lifelong student, Caroline is a well-respected lecturer and plant expert who has given presentations all over the country.
To most everybody else, my mother is a wonderful plant resource. To me, she's a wonderful cook who knows something about plants.
It's not often that I get to sit in such beautiful and fragrant surroundings, surrounded by all these native azaleas with their beautiful colors. You've even got this brilliant orange, which seems a little bit different than some of the others.
That's called an Oconee azalea, and it has no odor. So many of them smell just wonderfully, but this has no odor. And it comes in all sorts of colors, just yellow and orange more than anything else. Sometimes a deep red, people fight over to get one with a deep red. My first native azalea was a yellow one. We went to a state wildflower meeting and someone had brought one just a few inches tall 25 years ago. It was in an orange juice can, just a tiny little thing, but we planted it and now it's 15 or 20 feet tall.
So you just have to have patience and get a little cutting in an orange juice can.
It doesn't take long.
And I noticed that you've got some of these pines cut off at halfway down, or actually you take some stumps.
The pines have got the pine beetle in it, and we had to cut them. So we try to cut them off in a way to get them out without hurting the plants. Many years ago, this was just an open cotton field, and there was an old barn, and the cows went back and forth all up and down that lane, and a row of cedar trees, and we made a driveway on the old cow path. And then we built a house on top of the hill and planted all these trees around it. Neither one of us knew very much about trees or botany, anything. We went into the woods and dug what we thought were pretty trees and brought them and planted them. And now they've grown to be these huge things.
The native dogwood, Cornus Florida, and you've got a spectacular specimen here. That's a tree that really grows in a wide range of places. This is a mature specimen for a dogwood, and yeah. I just love the way it's rounded almost.
It's certainly beautiful in Opelika. Many years ago, the garden clubs had the Boy Scouts collect the seed, and the forestry department planted the seed and provided us with seedlings, and the Chamber of Commerce, along with the garden clubs, distributed them to the citizens, and they're planted all over the town.
How old is this specimen right here?
This one is about 25 years old. I said, oh, let's see, this. No, it must be 40. Time flies, it must be 40 years old.
Well, it's beautiful. You can't go wrong with a dogwood. It is almost a four-season tree. Caroline remembers being fascinated with wildflowers from the time she was a little girl, traveling the back roads on fishing trips with her father. By the age of 12, she was inspired to write poetry about her beautiful native wildflowers.
Let me see. The sun and the rain are doing their share to make spring's coming a brighter fire. That was the last stanza.
Along a woodland path near the entrance to her property, Caroline has made a special bed for some rare trillium, entrusted to her by a mentor. Caroline, some of these wildflowers, the little jewels of the forest, you really almost have to get down on your hands and knees to appreciate them.
They're also called belly plants.
Belly plants? Because you have to get down on your belly? And that looks like a little trillium. It's so tiny.
This is a beautiful little trillium called trillium pusillum. It's very, very rare and the smallest of all the trillium.
And is it just found in parts of Alabama? Is that why
it's particularly found in one spot in the Mount Sano in North Alabama.
Wow.
And they're the product of Dr. Freeman's studies for this particular plant and this species. When he died, his wife gave me these plants to take care of, and I've had them now for a good many years. Tiny as they are, they're 10 or 15 years, 10 years old.
That one little clump is 10 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
So you're continuing the legacy of this wonderful rare trillium.
Well, it's nice to have, and I enjoy studying it and growing them.
I had to cover a lot of ground to see even a fraction of Caroline Dean's 110 acres in Opelika, Alabama. I was particularly impressed with the large trees that Caroline and her late husband planted almost 50 years ago. Although they both loved to garden, Caroline's passion for learning all she could about plants came later in life and late into the night.
I reared 4 sons, and when they were about to be grown and all, and I had a little bit more time, I started studying wildflowers. My husband liked for me to go to bed at the same time. He didn't get up in the morning at the same time, and so after I was really sure that he was good sound asleep, I'd get up and go in the living room and start studying botany, and because I didn't have a lot of other free time.
I suppose my mother's been passionate about native plants for most of my life. Not just my mother, but my father as well. We have thousands of native azaleas here, and the 2 of them planted all of them.
Even though I don't think there's really such a thing as low-maintenance gardening, native azaleas are great plants for a woodland setting. This yellow and orange one, this is an Australian?
This is Australian, the Florida flame azalea. It's rare in the wild, but it's very easy to propagate, the easiest one to grow.
They actually can take a fair bit of sun for azaleas, can't they?
They bloom more if they're in the sun, but you find them in the woods in the wild.
And you've got such a large property. Actually, how large is your property?
Oh, it's 110 acres.
110 acres. So
But
you've
most
got,
of it's in woods. I haven't cultivated that much.
but you've got a big space to fill, and the native azaleas are a great thing under these pines and mixed in with the dogwoods. And this is a different selection on.
This is Connectin. This is what old-fashioned people call wild honeysuckle. It has no relation to honeysuckle at all, but
It smells good.
It smells real good like the honeysuckle. The real pink tips on the buds has drawn the attention of some propagators, and they have selected it to do some tissue culture with.
Do they have a name for it?
Well, they talked about naming it Caroline's Connectin
After you.
because I have it in my property.
Well, these can also get to be quite large, as we see here in your garden.
Yes.
That's something to keep in mind.
Some of them get 15 or 20 feet tall.
Well, what a perfect name for a beautiful plant. The buds are quite distinctive with all
Yes,
that pink.
they thought. And it opens into a really full cluster of blossoms.
Caroline's fascination with wildflowers led her into learning about photography as she documented her many finds over the years. She has carefully cataloged and organized her photographs and writings about flowers so that others can reap the benefits of her thirst for knowledge.
I have about 20,000 slides, but of course all of them aren't just perfect. But I keep them because each one has the record of the date they were taken and the place they were taken, which shows that that plant grew in that place at that time. It also has the common name for it and the scientific name on it. They're all cataloged and labeled, so it also has the catalog number on it.
Near the front of the property, Caroline has another woodland walk with more trillium beds for the endangered plants that have been rescued from the path of the bulldozer. Is there a trick to growing trilliums in Alabama?
It's very easy. It grows here normally, so it's just no problem at all.
But what is it about the environment here that they seem so happy? You've got them coming up.
Well, the soil is very acid, and these species like the acid soil. Some I don't have any that like the lime, so these are the ones that we like here.
And you've got a couple different types here.
Oh, there are a whole lot of different types. There's luteum, there's KHBI, there's cuneatum, there's decumbens.
Oh, well, you've already surpassed all my knowledge of trilliums, but I do recognize this little wildflower. Is that a Nemonella?
That's rue anemone or Thalictrum thalictrides.
It looks a lot different than some of the big garden thalictrums.
Yeah.
Caroline, is this what you'd call a true spring ephemeral? It'll just disappear as the summer gets...
Soon be gone, and you won't see it again till next year.
So you've got to keep track of where you put it.
That's right.
And what about those yellow flowers hanging
That's
down?
Uvularia perfoliata, a little bellwort.
And that's a native wildflower?
And the reason it's here is because when we dug the trillium, the uvularia was there, so that came too, and that's just part of it. When you get trillium, you get a lot of the other native plants that with it.
And this looks like all one variety of trillium in this bed over
Most
here.
of these over here are Decipians, and most of these came from the panhandle of Florida.
Decipians?
Decipian,
Trillium decipium.
that's right.
Is there a common name for that one?
Yes, deceiving trillium, because it looks
Deceiving
like so
trillium.
many of the other trilliums.
And how do you explain, this is some sort of, it looks like you use that for a cover?
Well, the deer just eat them to the ground. When the deer bites it off, then it has no leaves to make food for the next year. So you soon lose your whole patch of trillium if you don't protect it. So we use bird netting and build a frame to support the bird netting, and that keeps the deer away. They won't try to get into it. When you put the netting down beside the pine logs, it catches in the bark and stays down there.
Well, deceiving trillium, that's a new plant for me. Caroline Dean's 110-acre farm in Opelika, Alabama is an example of what one dedicated gardener can accomplish in a lifetime. Spectacular specimens of native azaleas mingle with mature trees planted over 50 years ago. Underneath these tall trees are gardens filled with rare woodland and bog plants that she nurtures. Caroline might be considered a late bloomer since she started her self-education in plants after her 4 boys were grown. And although she knows more than most people about her native Alabama wildflowers, she feels that you can never know enough.
I belong to an organization at Auburn University called Auburn University Academy of Lifelong Learners, and it's for people 55 years of age or older who are interested in continuing study. And about 1994, I bought a computer, and I learned without any trouble at all.
Most weeks my mother gives at least one wildflower presentation to some group. A couple of years ago, I think she spoke in 30 days' time in 4 different states.
But now my slide programs are getting to be passé, so I decided that I'd just put mine on PowerPoint. So now I've just been doing that.
I know this is a buckeye from the shape of the leaves, and I'm guessing it must be a native buckeye.
This is a rare buckeye because this form of it is the only glaber that I know that's native in the state. It's the state tree of Ohio. But this is a dwarf form of it.
But how did it get to Alabama?
Well, I don't know how it got here, but a friend found it on the side of the road in southwest Alabama and brought the seed and planted them and gave one of the bushes to me so that she spread it around a little bit.
And it's been in this spot for a while?
About 15 years.
15 years, and this is the ultimate size, then.
Yes, this is as big as it's going to get.
So it's Aesculus glabra nana?
Yep.
I like the yellow-green flowers. Is this
Yes, darling.
almost finished, or where is
Yeah.
it in its blooming period?
It's beginning to make seed. See the little bitty seed forming right there. And it's the very first thing to bloom in my garden. It starts blooming in January sometimes.
Really? Wow. And the rest of the spring and summer, it'll just have this pretty foliage.
Yes.
And the leaves are just beautiful. They're so structural and
Yeah,
architectural. This
Yeah.
is a potential good plant for a woodland garden.
It would be, yes. I think it's a fascinating plant.
I do too.
If you really want to learn about the native plants, if you grow them, you'll learn a lot more. And you learn the families of them and how they're named and why they are growing that way.
When you walk around the yard with my mother, we don't just look at that pretty flower over there. We get down and we examine it and see, now this is the female part and this is the male part. And then we talk about what insects or what manner by which it propagated. And it's just been an eye-opening experience for me.
What a charming dwarf iris.
This is the first iris called Iris verna. Verna means spring. And this is an early little first iris.
And is it a native as well?
Yes, it is. I planted just a few, and then they multiply. It multiplies very rapidly. It's an evergreen. The leaves stay green all winter long.
It looks just slightly of the little bulbous iris, Iris reticulata. But this is much better because it's evergreen and it's a little rhizome, so it spreads
Yes,
by rhizomes.
right on top of the ground almost. It blooms in the spring when the leaves haven't come on the trees, so that's when it's in the sun.
So deciduous shade.
Yes.
Moist soil, full sun, the perfect thing for
Yeah.
most plants. Caroline Dean's farm has become a safe haven for endangered bog plants, semi-aquatic plants that grow in soft, wet soil, like a swamp or a marsh. And the more rescued plants she receives, the more homemade bogs she builds. She's got it down to a science.
When we first moved here, we had a septic tank, and my husband didn't want the washing machine water to go in the septic tank, so he piped it on the outside of the house and let it drain out. Well, it made a wonderful bog, and I put pitcher plants in it, and it worked really well. This is a bog. We have pitcher plants planted in it. There's several species, the Aleda and the Flava and the Leucophila. And there's some really rare ones back here, the little Sarracenia rubra. And it's on the endangered list. All of them are rare, and they're all rescued plants. Everything in here is a rescued plant, too.
So you saved it, they were at a site that was
They
threatened?
were the places that roads were being built, and people would see them and bring them to me. So we had a whole collection of them and had to build a new bog to have some place to put them and save them.
It looks like Adamascus lilies blooming in this bog. It's a Zephyranthus, and it is a native plant.
Yes, it is. It can be found in the woods all around in the area.
Have you come upon it? Have you ever discovered it?
Oh, lots of times. I found it in the woods. I don't.
You found it in the woods?
Oh, well, I mean, it's been in the woods when I'm walking, and there it is. There's lots of it in all the woods around, in the moist woods.
But you wouldn't necessarily find it growing with pitcher plants?
No, it doesn't ordinarily grow in the bogs. It grows on damp roadside ditches. It's indigenous to this area and to all the southern part of the state.
And it's actually a bulb that you can incorporate. You could grow that in a flower garden with some of your other perennials.
Oh, yes,
and things.
it's a bulb, and it multiplies rapidly. It's easy to grow. It takes no attention whatsoever.
After spending the day at the Dean Farm in Opelika, Alabama, I realized that trying to keep up with Caroline takes a lot of effort. Although she's a great-grandmother, Caroline Dean hasn't let her age slow her down. She taught herself about computers and now maintains her own webpage, where she meets wildflower fans from around the world.
My webpage, I noticed the last time there were about 81,000 or 82,000 people have looked at it, and people from all over the world seem to see that somehow, and they write and ask me questions. School children from Alaska and Canada and Hawaii have all written, but people from Australia and Turkey and every country that you can think of, and I take the time to answer them, so that makes it fun for me and nice for them too.
Two types of silver bell trees are native to the southeast. A true collector, Caroline has both. This looks a lot like a Carolina silver bell, one of my favorite trees.
Well, it's like the Carolina, but this is Diptera. This is the two-winged silver bell.
Now, the difference between this and the Carolina silver bell?
The Carolina is more of a tube, and the Diptera has the petals open wider. They're separate petals. The Carolina silver bell has 4 wings for the seed, and the Diptera has 2 wings. It's a two-winged silver bell.
And this is Halesia diptera.
This is the prettiest to me. It's a showy blossom.
The silver bells are native trees, and are they native to this part of Alabama?
They're native to this area.
Wow. For people looking for alternatives to dogwoods or companions for dogwoods, this would be about the same size
and easy to grow,
tree.
yes.
And a great companion for all the native azaleas.
I think it is. It takes 2 years to germinate it.
So if you don't want to wait, you can just order one.
Oh, yes.
That's so pretty. Carolina silver bell relative.
Yes.
In my brief visit with Caroline, I was inspired by her thirst for knowledge and her passion for sharing what she's learned. She is truly one of a kind.
I see her affecting the life of everybody from the 4th grade classes that she teaches every year about plants to the retired folks who have a genuine interest in learning more about plants. You think maybe you get too old to learn, but that's not really true, because some of these folks are really old and they're still trying to learn.
Sharing is the whole thing. So many of the schools have asked me to talk to their children, and they use my webpage, and that pleases me to think that I'm doing a little bit of good.
When I visit gardens, I make new friends and discover new plants. Here are some treasures from Caroline Dean's garden. The Oconee azalea is among the best for heat and drought tolerance. It's available in red, yellow, and orange. If you want a choice Native American tree for a small garden, this buckeye is a worthy candidate. In warmer climates, it begins blooming as early as January. Iris verna is known as a beardless iris. Its evergreen foliage complements any shade garden. In spite of its common name, the Adamasco lily belongs to the Amaryllis family. It's also sweetly fragrant. The two-winged silverbell grows 20 to 30 feet tall. It thrives in a moist soil. If you want to be inspired, visit someone else's garden. You never know what you might find. Join us again on A Gardener's Diary.